The ancient beings watched in silence. They had existed before the first stars flickered to life, before the first civilizations rose and fell across the galaxies. They had seen empires rise in fire and crumble into dust, their histories forgotten by time itself. To them, the passage of millennia was no different than a passing breeze. They had never known fear, never seen a force that could shake them. Until now. Across the vast black void of space, the human fleet approached. Their warships were small compared to the armadas of the great galactic powers, their numbers insignificant against the endless legions of the elder races. And yet, something about them was different. Something made even the oldest of the ageless beings pause. Their ships did not shimmer with the ethereal glow of ancient technology. They did not hum with the quiet power of civilizations that had mastered the fabric of reality. Instead, they were dark, rugged, and built with an unforgiving efficiency. Metal and fire, steel and will, every ship a testament to humanity's relentless nature. For centuries, the ageless beings had observed mankind from the edges of the void, curious about this young and reckless species that had crawled out of their fragile world. At first, humans had seemed weak mortal creatures bound by time, their lives nothing more than brief sparks in the endless night. But time and again, they had defied expectations. Where others bent, they stood. Where others broke, they fought. And now, the humans were here. The Great Council had not been concerned when the first reports came in. A fleet? From Earth? It was almost amusing. The elder races had seen countless species attempt to claim their place among the stars, only to be crushed beneath the weight of their own insignificance. This time would be no different. Or so they thought. As the human warships closed the distance, the Council watched with growing unease. Their sensors scanned the fleet, expecting to find crude weapons and primitive shielding. Instead, they found something else, something unsettling. The ships were alive with energy, but not in the way of the elder race's vessels. There was no reliance on ancient artifacts or borrowed power. Instead, everything about them spoke of relentless innovation, of a species that had clawed its way to dominance through sheer determination. The ageless beings did not fear death. To them, time was meaningless, and destruction was simply another step in the endless cycle of existence. But as they watched humanity's fleet move with a precision that rivaled even the greatest of the old empires, something stirred within them. It was not fear, not yet. But it was something close. Across the void, a message was sent. A single transmission, brief and direct. Turn back. For a moment, silence filled the vast emptiness between them. And then, the humans responded. No. It was not a threat, nor was it a plea. It was simply a statement of fact. They had come for a reason, and they would not leave until that purpose was fulfilled. The elder races had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. But as they watched the human fleet press forward, unshaken, undeterred, an unsettling realization dawned upon them. This time, things might be different. And for the first time in countless millennia, the ageless beings felt something they had not known in eons. Doubt. The silence stretched across the void, thick and heavy. The elder beings had not expected defiance. When they spoke, lesser species listened. When they commanded, empires obeyed. This was how it had always been. Yet here was a species that did not cower, did not hesitate. They had responded with a single word, as if the demand to retreat was beneath them. And still, their fleet advanced. The council chamber of the elder beings was vast, lined with towering structures of shimmering energy, shifting and twisting like liquid light. Beings who had existed before the first recorded wars of the galaxy gathered, their forms shifting between the physical and the intangible, their thoughts echoing across the chamber like whispers from another time. Their expressions were unreadable, yet something lingered in the air. Uncertainty. They do not understand what they challenge, one of the elders murmured, their voice smooth and layered with countless lifetimes of wisdom. They do, another countered. That is what unsettles me. For eons, the elder races had enforced their rule without question. They did not conquer, not in the way lesser species understood war. They did not send fleets of destruction or armies to burn worlds. Instead, they made their will known, and civilizations obeyed. If a race refused to kneel, they simply vanished erased from the cosmos without a trace, as if they had never been. The humans had been watched for a long time. At first, they had seemed unremarkable. A primitive species crawling out of their own gravity well, barely grasping the fundamentals of space travel. But unlike the others, they did not follow the expected path. They did not expand in predictable ways, did not rely on borrowed technology or the remnants of older empires. Every advancement they made was their own, and with each step, they moved faster, adapted quicker. The elders had waited for them to stagnate. All species did, eventually. Progress slowed, curiosity faded, ambition withered. But humanity never stopped. It was as if they thrived on hardship, pushing forward no matter the obstacles before them. Every war, every catastrophe, every challenge only made them stronger. And now they were here. Not as supplicants, not as diplomats seeking permission to exist, but as an undeniable force. The human fleet was still outnumbered. The elder beings had warships the size of moons, weapons that could unmake entire solar systems with a whisper. The humans did not. Their ships were smaller, heavily armored, built for war in a way that was almost primitive. And yet, something about them sent a chill through the ancient chamber. The energy signatures of the human vessels were strange, different from anything the elder beings had encountered. There was no trace of ancient power, no reliance on relics from forgotten eras. Every pulse of energy, every calculation, every movement, it was all purely human. That is their strength, an elder finally admitted. They do not build upon the past. They forge their own path. But the others were not convinced. They have come too far, one of the elders said, their tone shifting. They must be stopped. A decision was made. Not a declaration of war, for the elders did not wage war. There was no need. All they had to do was reach out, tighten their grip, and watch as an entire species faded from existence. A single pulse of energy rippled through the void, invisible to human sensors but unmistakable to those who understood the fabric of the universe. It was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a warning. A final reminder of the balance that had always existed. And yet, the human fleet did not stop. If anything, they moved faster. The signal was received aboard the lead human warship. The bridge was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of screens and the pulsing red light that signaled a threat. Officers stood at their stations, watching, waiting. They had known this moment would come. They had not expected mercy. Message received, the communications officer confirmed. There was no need to repeat it. Everyone on the bridge knew what it meant. It was not just a warning. It was a test. A final chance to turn back before history swallowed them whole. The fleet commanders sat in silence, staring at the displays. The faces of the crew were calm, determined. None of them had expected to survive this mission, but they had come anyway. Not for glory, not for conquest. For survival. Humanity had learned long ago that peace was an illusion, that safety was a lie told to those too weak to fight for their place. The galaxy was not a kind place, and it certainly was not fair. They had watched lesser civilizations vanish, entire species erased without so much as a battle. The elders did not wage war. They simply decided who was allowed to exist. The humans had no intention of being erased. The commander's voice was steady, unwavering. Proceed. The order was given. The fleet did not hesitate. Engines flared, weapons powered up. Not in aggression, but in preparation. A response came almost instantly. The elders did not need to speak. Reality itself shifted around the human fleet, the fabric of space bending to their will. It was not a traditional attack. It was something far worse. The stars themselves seemed to move, twisting into impossible patterns. The vastness of space grew thick, heavy, as if trying to press down upon the intruders. The elder beings had done this before. Countless times. Those who resisted them did not die in battle. They simply ceased to be, swallowed by the void, erased as if they had never been. But something was wrong. The humans did not disappear. Their ships did not flicker from existence. Instead, they adapted. The moment space itself twisted, the human ships adjusted. Calculations were made in an instant, engines fired in precise bursts, weapons recalibrated. They did not resist the shift. They moved with it, turning the elder being's own power against them. For the first time in countless millennia, the elders hesitated. This was not how it was supposed to go. No species had ever resisted. No fleet had ever survived the first touch of their will. And yet, the humans endured. On the bridge of the lead ship, the commander watched as the displays flickered, as the world around them twisted into something unnatural. He did not waver. "Maintain formation," he ordered. The officers obeyed without question. They had been trained for this, prepared for the impossible. Humanity had spent centuries fighting against extinction, surviving against odds that should have broken them. This was no different. The fleet adjusted, shifted, adapted. And then, something happened that had never happened before. The elder beings felt resistance. Not defiance. Not arrogance. Something far worse. Understanding. The humans had seen the pattern. They had recognized the trap. And instead of falling into it, they had found a way through. The elders did not breathe, did not feel fear the way lesser species did. But as they watched the human fleet push forward, as they felt their power slip through their grasp, a single, undeniable truth settled over them. This was not just another species clawing at the stars. This was something different. Something dangerous. And for the first time in the history of their existence, the ageless beings knew they had made a mistake. They had underestimated humanity. And now, it was too late. The void trembled. Not from explosions, not from weapons, but from something deeper, something older. The ageless beings had never struggled before. Their power was the law of the universe itself, an unchallenged force that dictated who thrived and who vanished. Yet now, for the first time in countless eons, that power met resistance. The human fleet should not have survived this long. By all logic, by all history, they should have been erased, forgotten, as so many before them had been. But they endured. Not because they were the strongest. Not because they had superior weapons. But because they refused to be anything less than what they were. The lead human warship pushed forward, its hull glowing with heat from the distortions in space. The ship's AI ran thousands of calculations per second, constantly adjusting course to keep the vessel from being swallowed by the twisting void. The crew barely spoke. They didn't need to. They trusted their training, trusted their instincts, trusted the one truth that had always defined humanity: adapt or die. The elder beings observed, silent and unmoving. But beneath their stillness, something flickered in emotion they had long forgotten. Frustration. The humans were not following the script. They were supposed to falter, to break, to collapse beneath the sheer weight of forces beyond their comprehension. But instead they were learning. Every twist in space, every shift in reality, the humans adjusted. What should have been a slow erasure became a battlefield of sheer willpower. Then, something impossible happened. A human warship broke through. It was small, barely the size of a frigate, but it cut through the distortion like a knife. Space around it stabilized, as if refusing to let the ship be unmade. The humans had done something no species had ever done before. They had taken what was meant to destroy them and turned it into a path forward. The elder being stirred. The balance of power had never been questioned. Until now. A ripple of thought passed between them, ancient minds linking in perfect synchronization. They had choices now. They could escalate, unleash destruction unlike anything humanity had ever seen. But something held them back. A strange, gnawing doubt. What if destruction would not work? They had never asked that question before. They had never needed to. Every species that had resisted had been wiped away like dust on a forgotten relic. But this time, something was different. The human fleet did not slow. One by one, their warships broke through, pushing deeper into the void that had swallowed so many before them. They should have been afraid. They should have hesitated. But fear was a luxury humans had abandoned long ago. The lead warship's commander watched the data stream in real time. Readings that should have been impossible filled the screens. The void ahead was no longer a mystery, it was a map, a structure, a pattern. The elders had been playing this game for so long that they had never considered someone might learn the rules. "We're getting closer," the tactical officer muttered. The commander nodded. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were advancing. A new distortion surged toward them, stronger, more violent than before. The elder beings were reacting, trying to erase the humans before they could reach the source of their power. The walls of reality bent, warping into a crushing force that threatened to swallow the entire fleet. The ship's alarms wailed, pressure warnings flashing red across the displays. The structure of space itself was being rewritten to trap them, fold them out of existence. But the humans had already come too far. The commander took a slow breath, eyes locked on the swirling abyss before them. Every instinct screamed that this was a death trap, a final gambit from an enemy that had never needed one before. "Full power to the shields," the commander ordered. "Redirect all remaining energy to forward thrusters. We're pushing through." The ship lurched, engines roaring as it surged toward the heart of the anomaly. The elder beings watched, waiting for the inevitable. No force in the universe had ever survived direct exposure to their full power. But humanity was not like the others. The distortion struck like a tidal wave. Space itself rippled, twisting, screaming as if reality was being torn apart. The human fleet buckled under the pressure, hulls creaking, energy levels plummeting. And then something shifted. Instead of resisting, the humans let go. Their ships moved with the flow, engines adjusting, stabilizers compensating for the warping effects. They had studied the distortions, understood their patterns. And now, they were using them. One by one, the human ships slipped through the chaos, dodging through gaps where there should have been none. The elder beings watched in silence, their vast minds struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. No species had ever done this. No species should have been able to do this. The humans had turned their greatest weapon into a doorway. The lead ship was the first to reach the other side. The swirling abyss fell away, and for the first time, humanity gazed upon the heart of the ageless being's domain. A structure floated before them. Not a planet, not a station, but something else entirely. It pulsed with energy beyond human comprehension, shifting between dimensions, existing everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the source, the heart of their power. And for the first time, the elder beings felt something alien to them. Dread. The humans had made it. They had survived what no species before them had. They had reached the very core of an existence that was supposed to be untouchable. And now, the ageless beings realized the true danger of this species. They had not just come to fight. They had come to win. The human fleet drifted into the unknown, their warships casting long shadows across the shifting abyss. They had done the impossible, reached the heart of the ageless being's dominion, a place where no species should have survived. The vast, pulsing structure before them defied explanation, existing in multiple dimensions at once, its shifting form a testament to the limitless power these beings wielded. And yet, for the first time, that power hesitated. The silence was eerie. The elder beings did not attack. They did not speak. They only watched. The humans had forced them into something they had never encountered before: uncertainty. The commander of the lead warship studied the readings flooding his screen. Every sensor struggled to define what they were looking at. The structure was neither solid nor fluid, either alive nor dead. It was something in between, something ancient and unbound by the rules humanity understood. And at its core, deep within its pulsing mass, something shifted. A single voice, unlike anything before, filled every human mind at once. It was not words, not sound, but pure thought, an echo of something vast beyond comprehension. "Why have you come?" The crew jolted. Some clutched their heads, others steadied themselves against the weight of a presence that had never spoken before. This was not like the elder beings they had faced. This was something deeper, something older. The commander straightened. "We came to survive," he said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming force pressing into his thoughts. "And we came to end this." A pause. Then, the presence shifted. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something else. "And what?" The commander exhaled slowly. The weight of humanity rested on this moment. "Your control," he said. "Your endless cycle of destruction." No more. For the first time, the vast presence wavered. The elder beings had always maintained the illusion that they were invincible, that no force could challenge them. But now, here was humanity, not just standing before them but challenging them. Then, the second shock came. The pulsing structure at the heart of the abyss responded. It did not lash out. It did not destroy. It shifted. And deep within, something else stirred. The elder beings reacted instantly. Space around them twisted violently, distortions spreading out like cracks in the fabric of reality itself. It was panic. The humans had expected wrath, but what they saw was something worse. Fear. The presence returned, sharper, almost desperate. "You do not understand what you have awakened." The ship's alarms blared. The abyss itself was changing, twisting, unraveling. But it wasn't targeting the humans. It was collapsing in on itself. The commander's hands clenched. "What is it?" No response. Only the growing tremors of something ancient, something the elder beings had hidden, locked away beyond the reach of time itself. And now, because of humanity, it was waking up. The realization hit the crew like a shockwave. The elder beings had not created this power. They had been keeping it contained. And now, that prison was breaking. The fleet's sensors screamed warnings: dimensional instability, rising gravitational forces, something moving beneath the abyss. The humans had fought their way here expecting to face a war. Instead, they had become the spark that set something free. A low, distant sound filled the void, neither mechanical nor organic. It was something deeper, more fundamental, like the first breath of something that had been buried for eternity. The elder beings had turned their full attention away from the humans now. Their massive forms hovered before the structure, they were bending reality in desperate attempts to contain what was coming. And then, without warning, one of them vanished. No attack. No explosion. Just gone. As if erased from existence. The others recoiled. The humans felt the ripple of raw terror from beings who had never known such a thing before. A second vanished. Then a third. The presence returned, fractured now, barely holding itself together. "You have doomed us all." The commander watched as the abyss split apart, revealing something beneath. Something vast. Something unknowable. For the first time in history, humanity had not just survived the impossible. They had unleashed something even the gods feared. The abyss trembled, its vast emptiness no longer silent but filled with a deep, reverberating hum. It was not sound, not a vibration in space, but something deeper, something that pressed against the very fabric of existence. The elder beings, once towering and untouchable, had been reduced to fleeting shadows, vanishing one by one into nothingness. The humans had come expecting a war, but they had instead become witnesses to something far more terrifying. The commander stood frozen on the bridge, staring at the swirling void ahead. The structure, the heart of the elder being's power, was no longer stable. Its pulsing form cracked and split apart, revealing something behind it. Not a weapon, not a being, but something else entirely. It was absence. Not darkness, not matter, but a void so complete that it swallowed everything it touched. It had no form, no movement, yet it spread across the abyss like a rising tide. The humans could feel it, not with their eyes, not with their instruments, but with something deeper, the same primal instinct that once made their ancestors shiver in the night at the presence of unseen predators. A final, desperate voice filled their minds. You were never the threat. The last of the elder beings twisted in agony, their immense forms dissolving as they tried to fight what had already consumed them. They had ruled for eons, shaping reality itself, but they had never been gods. They had been keepers. And now, their prison was broken. The ship's alarms screamed warnings, but there were no solutions, no countermeasures. What spread from the abyss was not a force, not an attack, but the unraveling of reality itself. The commander gritted his teeth. All ships, retreat now! Engines roared to life, the human fleet turning away, racing against something they could not hope to outrun. But it was not chasing them. It did not need to. It simply was, and wherever it spread, existence itself ceased. The stars in the distance flickered, dimming one by one. The void did not consume. It erased. A realization settled over the crew like ice. The elder beings had not feared humanity because of their strength. They had feared what humanity might find. The bridge lights flickered. Time itself felt stretched, distorted, as if the universe was forgetting that this place had ever existed. Then, just as the last remnants of the elder beings vanished, the structure at the heart of the abyss did something impossible. It reached for the humans. Not to destroy them. Not to erase them. But to choose them. A final pulse of energy surged outward, wrapping around the lead ship like unseen hands. The crew staggered as visions filled their minds, fragments of forgotten history, civilizations erased long before even the elder beings had risen. They saw the truth. This force had existed since the beginning. It was neither evil nor merciful. It was balance itself, the final reckoning for all things that had ever defied the natural order. The elder beings had delayed it, but they had never defeated it. They had only postponed the inevitable. But humanity was different. They were not rulers. They were not keepers. They were something else, something unpredictable, something that had defied extinction over and over again. And in that unpredictability, in that raw, relentless refusal to fade, they had done something no species had ever done before. They had been seen. The structure collapsed inward, folding into itself, shrinking until it was no more than a single, pulsing spark of energy. Then, in a final flicker, it surged forward into the human fleet. The wave passed through every ship, every soldier, every mind. And then, just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. The void was still. The abyss was empty. And the humans remained. The commander's breath was ragged as he looked at his crew. They were alive. Their ships were intact. But they were changed. The stars ahead were no longer familiar. The universe itself felt different, as if something fundamental had shifted. A quiet voice broke the silence. What just happened? No one answered. No one could. Because the war was over. And humanity was now something more than they had ever been before. The silence stretched across the bridge as the crew tried to comprehend what had just happened. The abyss, once alive with impossible forces, had gone still. The elder beings, the so-called gods of the stars, were no more. And yet, the humans remained, untouched but forever changed. The commander exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening against the console as he scanned the fleet's status. Every ship was intact, every crew member accounted for. The sensors reported nothing: no enemy ships, no gravitational anomalies, no evidence that the battle they had just fought had ever happened. Yet the stars beyond looked different. The universe itself felt altered. One of the officers hesitated before speaking. Sir, I don't understand. What did it do to us? No one had an answer. The presence they had encountered at the heart of the abyss had left something behind, something unseen but deeply felt. It was not an attack. It was not a gift. It was a recognition. The ship's engines hummed as they prepared for the long journey home, but the crew knew they were no longer just returning to Earth. They were returning with the weight of something greater than themselves. A scientist from the lower decks finally spoke, his voice shaking. I don't think it changed us physically. But I think it saw us. And in doing so, we became part of something larger than we understand. The words unsettled the crew. They had always thought of themselves as explorers, warriors, survivors. But now, they were something more. The last act of the abyss had been a choice, a decision that humanity was different from the ones who had ruled before. The commander rubbed his forehead. We'll analyze everything once we're back. For now, set a course for Earth. As the fleet turned, the void behind them remained still. There was no pursuit, no lingering presence, just the quiet vastness of space. But the humans knew they had not escaped unchanged. The journey home was long and quiet. The crew spoke in hushed tones, not out of fear but out of something deeper, a feeling that they had touched something beyond mortal understanding. The universe had secrets, and for the first time, humanity had been allowed to glimpse them. Days passed before the first signs appeared. It began with small things. A pilot in the lower decks reported seeing flashes of movement in the corner of his vision, shadows that weren't there. A technician swore she heard whispers when she was alone. None of it was threatening, none of it dangerous, just echoes of something unseen. The commander kept the reports to himself at first. Maybe it was just the after effects of the battle, the mind trying to make sense of something impossible. But then, the dreams started. Not nightmares. Not visions. But something in between. The crew found themselves dreaming of places they had never been, of stars that no longer existed, of civilizations wiped from time itself. And in those dreams, they were not just observers. They were remembering. The realization came slowly, but it was undeniable. The presence in the abyss had not just let them live. It had left something behind. The fleet finally neared Earth, their homeworld shining like a blue jewel against the darkness. But as they approached, they felt it, something subtle, something deep. The stars were no longer just stars. The void was no longer just empty space. They could feel it. The commander stood at the bridge, staring at the vastness beyond the ship's viewport. He had spent his life believing in the limits of the universe, in the things that could be measured and understood. But now, he knew better. One of the officers broke the silence. Do we tell them? The commander let out a slow breath. Would they believe us? The crew exchanged glances. How could they explain that humanity had just been acknowledged by something ancient, something beyond comprehension? That they had survived not because of their strength, but because of something deeper, something the elder beings had never possessed? The fleet descended into Earth's atmosphere, the familiar glow of city lights stretching across the planet's surface. They had returned. They had won. But they had also become something more. The reports were filed, the debriefings completed. The world celebrated their victory, believing that humanity had overcome its greatest threat. But those who had been there, those who had stood in the abyss, knew the truth. The war was over. But something else had begun. As the commander stepped onto solid ground for the first time in months, he closed his eyes and listened. The whispers were still there. Not voices. Not threats. Just a quiet reminder that they had been seen. That the universe was watching. And that one day, it would call upon humanity again.